So today I'm going to talk about this journal that I found online. It's really interesting. It's about wheat allergies in children and how a lot of children today are on wheat-free diets when really they shouldn't be because there's some other allergens that are being confused and diagnosed as wheat allergies. And a lot of that comes from allergens from different types of grass and pollen from that grass. So they went more in depth with wheat components and tested it with the immunoglobulin E antibodies in order to see if there was a difference in the more defined wheat components versus the broader wheat oral challenge. Um, and a lot of this I'm going to scroll through quickly. But so basically, before I get started talking about this, I'm going to explain that immunoglobulin E is present in the circulation in the body at low concentrations, and it's mainly involved in the defense against parasites, but it also shows elevated concentration in a reaction, an allergic reaction, or it's in the context of an allergic disease. Um, each type of immunoglobulin E, or the antibody, it has a radar that's specific for a specific allergen. So that's kind of why they broke the wheat down into different parts to see if it was actually specific for that wheat allergen or a different pollen allergen. So for patients that have an established allergic disease, the measure of the total antibody, the IgE, is necessary for the identification of the candidates in order for them to possibly move on to get any kind of therapy, which is it's an anti-antibody basically. It's an anti-immunoglobulin E therapy, and that's where they are given a certain amount of anti-immunoglobulin E, which binds to the receptor on the immunoglobulin E, and that stops that from binding to the mast cells or the basophil cells, which helps to reduce allergic symptoms. That's not really talked about in this, but that's just a background information about the immunoglobulin E so you can understand how it's being used in this specific study. Some more background information is about wheat allergies. Wheat allergies and sensitations, they're more common in children, and usually children tend to grow out of this allergy around the age of 16. Sometimes they won't if they're given wheat before around 6 months. A lot of times children will have a wheat allergy for a while, for the rest of their life potentially. This allergy can be associated with anaphylaxis and other dangerous symptoms, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and it can potentially lead to even worse symptoms. And diagnosis of the immunoglobulin E mediated wheat allergy is based on medical history, detection of the specific antibody to the wheat, and oral food challenges. So those are all three things that are looked at also in this study. All of these children that have been given this have been, or 63 of them have been previously diagnosed with a wheat allergy and are currently on wheat-free diets. Children that showed, just a heads up, children that showed severe symptoms to oral challenges previously were not tested orally in this study. So there are a certain amount of children in the study that did not complete all of the other studies. And there's also no current treatment for a wheat allergy except for basically to avoid it altogether. So this study was based on the children's wheat allergies and the diagnostic properties of the wheat component. And the children that were confirmed with wheat allergies had higher levels after the end of the study. They had higher levels of the immunoglobulin E, which correlated with the severity of their reactions. So the children that had higher levels of the IgE when it came to the wheat allergy showed worse reactions, and that is shown down here. And this also shows different allergies and different symptoms of these children. Um, so only half of the children who were previously diagnosed reacted to the oral challenge wheat test, which shows that the half of the children that did not react are on wheat-free diets when they really should not be. One way that they really broke down a farther study into diagnosing this allergy is they took 4 different components of what is found in wheat, 4 different wheat components, and then also tested with wheat itself. And they tested the antibody level with all 4 of these different components. So children that reacted, these are the children that could not eat due to their previous symptoms. But the children that did react and have higher levels to these 4 different wheat-specific components showed that it's useful in differentiating clinically relevant sensitizations to wheat. So the levels of the omega-5 gliadin, the antibody level specific for the gliadin, the higher molecular weight glutenin, and the lower molecular weight glutenin were all high in association with children who have been diagnosed with a wheat allergy. When they were tested with just a wheat extract, it showed that they had higher levels, but they weren't reacting specifically to the wheat. And they are building up tolerance to the wheat based on their pollen that they've been coming across and stuff like that. So this basically, by testing the smaller 4 components instead of the larger component, it's easier to get an understanding that the allergy is directed towards wheat specifically, and it's not getting any other misconception. So basically this is showing that in the future, any kind of diagnostic should be done with more look into it. Basically, they should study the omega-5 gliadin or the other 3 components and look at the antibody levels in comparison to those components versus just a component that can be confused as many different other things, instead of putting these children on wheat-free diets when after a while it's not necessary. I mean, even some of these children that have previously reacted to an oral challenge, after a while they still have the higher antibody levels in their body when it comes to wheat, but they have picked up a tolerance and they've outgrown that tolerance, but they're still reacting just as badly to these smaller components. So this is something that can definitely be looked into and broadened and give us a better understanding of a wheat allergy and what is actually an allergy to specifically wheat, not to pollen or grass. Grass is a very typical confusion. And these allergies are continuing to grow in the population. So if we can start to identify the specific receptors that the immunoglobulin E antibodies are picking up, it'll be easier for us to understand what specifically the allergy is to instead of just a broader term. And this gives people more of a chance to be treated for these allergies in hopes to move forward one day and eventually get some kind of auto or immunotherapy and helps with this allergic reaction.